There are moments in life that arrive without warning, moments so profoundly jarring that they shake the very foundation of your being, leaving you gasping for air and questioning the reality you once took for granted. It was a quiet evening, the kind where the world seems to pause for a fleeting second, giving space for reflection and the unspoken bonds between parent and child. My daughter, who had always been the light of our home, the soft laughter that filled rooms with warmth, approached me with eyes that seemed older than her years, carrying a weight I could not yet comprehend. At first, I thought she merely wanted to share a small secret, a childhood confession of innocence, a question or curiosity. But the moment she whispered the words, the universe seemed to tilt, and every certainty I had clung to dissolved into a mist of disbelief and heartbreak. Her voice was soft, almost fragile, trembling in a way that betrayed the courage it took for her to speak. There was an urgency, a desperation that made it impossible to ignore, a gravity that forced me to listen with every fiber of my being. The words themselves were simple, almost innocuous in structure, yet their impact was cataclysmic. They pierced through my soul like shards of glass, leaving behind wounds that no balm could soothe. I remember the sudden tightness in my chest, the way my heart seemed to stall mid-beat, caught between disbelief and the crushing weight of a truth I had never anticipated. It was a truth so raw, so profoundly piercing, that even the air around me felt heavier, as if the universe itself acknowledged the enormity of what had been revealed. In the moments that followed, time itself seemed to fracture. Seconds stretched into eternities, and I found myself replaying her words over and over in my mind, attempting to understand, to rationalize, to reconcile them with the reality I had known. Each repetition did not bring clarity. It brought only a deeper ache, a more profound recognition of the chasm that now lay between what I believed and what had been revealed. The normal rhythm of life, the laughter, the routines, the mundane details that once seemed so comforting, now felt hollow, distant, almost surreal. Everything I had taken for granted, every assumption about the safety and predictability of my world, had been irrevocably altered in a single, quiet whisper. There was a paradox in the pain, an almost unbearable duality. On one hand, there was the innocence of my daughter, the purity of her intention, the necessity of her revelation. On the other hand, there was the devastation it brought, a rupture in my heart that seemed impossible to mend. It was as though the weight of her words had physical substance, pressing down on my shoulders, making each breath an exertion. Ordinary actions, standing, walking, even the simple act of breathing, became labors, tasks so heavy that they reminded me with every motion of the fragility of my emotional state. This was a truth that demanded acknowledgement, a reality that refused to be ignored, and yet it carried with it a cruelty that seemed almost unfair in its intensity. I found myself reflecting on the moments leading up to that evening, searching for signs, for hints, for anything that might have prepared me for what was to come. I questioned whether I had been blind, inattentive, or simply naive. Had I missed something? Had the world conspired in its subtlety to shield me from the inevitability of this revelation? Yet the more I searched, the more I realized that some truths are meant to arrive unannounced, to crash into our lives with the force of a storm, leaving us to navigate the wreckage in their aftermath. Her whisper was not just words, it was a catalyst, an awakening to a reality I could no longer deny, a reminder that life's fragility is often hidden beneath layers of routine and comfort, waiting only for the right moment to reveal itself in its full, unrelenting power. The emotional weight was compounded by the intimacy of the moment. A daughter's words carry a different kind of authority, a depth of sincerity that transcends logic or reason. They are not just statements, they are confessions that reveal the hidden layers of a soul, reflections of innocence and perception intertwined. In that whisper, I heard not just the truth itself, but the love, the fear, and the trust that compelled her to share it with me. And yet, paradoxically, it was this very trust that amplified the pain, for I realized that her courage had come at the cost of shattering my own sense of security and understanding. It was a moment of profound connection and equally profound disruption, a collision of worlds within the intimate space of our shared bond. Physically, I could feel the impact in ways that were almost tangible. My hands trembled, my vision blurred, and a coldness spread through my chest, radiating outward until it felt as though it occupied every corner of my being. Breathing became an effort, as if the air itself had thickened, heavy with the gravity of the words that had been spoken. I could no longer rely on the familiar rhythm of life to steady me. The foundation had shifted, and I was left unmoored, adrift in an ocean of emotional turbulence. It was a reminder that some truths are not just mental or emotional. They are visceral, sensed as acutely in the body as in the heart, and their resonance can be both immediate and enduring. I remember sitting there long after the words had been spoken, caught in a liminal space between comprehension and disbelief. The room around me continued in its ordinary motions, but I was suspended in a bubble of altered reality, my mind looping through the whisper, dissecting it, examining every nuance, every syllable. Each utterance revealed layers of meaning I had not initially perceived, each pause and inflection carrying weight I could not have anticipated. It was a truth that demanded not just hearing but deep, immersive understanding, a reckoning with the realities it unveiled, and the emotional labor required to process it was immense. Even now, as I recall that moment, the memory retains its potency. The whisper was not fleeting. It has left an indelible mark, a permanent fissure in the landscape of my emotional life. It reshaped the way I perceive my daughter, our relationship, and the fragile constructs of trust, love, and vulnerability. There is no undoing such a revelation, no erasing the echoes of those words once they have found their home in your consciousness. And yet, within the devastation, there is also a recognition of the courage it took to speak, the necessity of truth even when it is unbearable, and the profound intimacy that is forged in moments of such raw honesty. This revelation, delivered in the quietest of ways, has become a defining moment. It serves as a reminder that life's most transformative experiences often arrive unheralded, disguised as the simplest gestures, the softest words, the whispers that carry within them the power to reshape everything. And though the pain is immense, the truth remains, a beacon of clarity, an undeniable force that commands attention, reflection, and ultimately, a confrontation with the depth of one's own heart and resilience. The truth we hear from those we love most often carries with it a weight far greater than the words themselves. It is not merely a statement. It is a force that presses against the heart and mind with an almost unbearable intensity. When my daughter whispered that truth, it did not just reach my ears. It sank into me, filling every space within my chest with a heaviness I had never experienced. There was a sudden, almost physical pressure, a sensation as though the air itself had thickened, refusing to flow freely, making each breath a laborious task. It was as if the simple act of inhaling and exhaling had become a mirror of the emotional burden I now carried, a constant reminder that some truths do not simply reside in the mind. They take residence in the body, in the very rhythm of life itself. The weight of that moment was compounded by its quietness. There were no dramatic announcements, no angry confrontations, no overt chaos, just a whisper, soft and deliberate, that carried a universe of meaning. The quietness was deceptive because it amplified the emotional force behind the words. The mind often underestimates the power of subtlety, yet in that gentle murmur lay a storm. Every syllable seemed to resonate, echoing in the empty spaces of my soul, each one punctuated by the trust and vulnerability of my daughter. It was impossible to ignore and impossible to process quickly. It demanded attention, demanded reflection, and demanded an emotional reckoning that left no part of me untouched. Pain, I discovered, can manifest in ways both obvious and insidious. There was the immediate, almost visceral ache in my chest, a tightness that made my heart feel as though it were under siege. But there were other forms of suffering as well, the creeping sense of disbelief, the questioning of my own perceptions, the sudden awareness of all the things I had never known or noticed. Each layer of this truth peeled away the comfort of ignorance, exposing raw nerves of emotion that throbbed with relentless intensity. I became acutely aware of the fragility of happiness, the delicate veneer of normalcy that life often provides. That whisper shattered the illusion of safety, reminding me that emotional weight is not always visible, yet it can crush with a force as powerful as any physical blow. It was in the way this emotional weight altered my perception of ordinary moments that its true impact became apparent. Simple acts, a quiet walk down the hallway, the sound of the kettle boiling, the sunlight falling across the floor, were all imbued with a newfound gravity. Every sound and sight carried a subtle reminder of the truth I had been forced to confront, and every routine action became an exercise in endurance. Even silence was heavy, as if the world itself had absorbed the sorrow and now pressed it upon me. There was a sense of being suspended in time, caught between the life I had known and the reality that had been thrust upon me, a liminal space where the emotional weight was almost a tangible companion, impossible to escape. I began to notice how the emotional burden seeped into every aspect of my being. Thoughts that had once been light and playful now felt laden with gravity. Laughter felt distant, as though a curtain had been drawn over its warmth. My eyes carried an awareness of vulnerability, a sensitivity to the fragility of connection, and a heightened empathy for others' pain. It was as though the act of carrying this weight had expanded the capacity of my heart, forcing me to feel more deeply, more acutely, and more consciously than ever before. And yet, with this expansion came exhaustion. The constant presence of this emotional load made even the simplest interactions feel draining, a reminder that some truths do not just affect the mind, they ripple through the very essence of who we are. There were moments when the heaviness became almost suffocating. Sitting alone, I would sometimes press my hands to my chest, as though physically holding the weight of what I had heard might make it manageable. I tried to speak, to articulate the pain, but words often failed me, slipping away before they could convey the depth of my despair. And in that failure, I felt a secondary pain, the frustration of being trapped within an overwhelming experience without a means of expression. It was a reminder that emotional weight is not always communicable. Some burdens are meant to be carried internally, forcing a confrontation with the self that is both intimate and isolating. The emotional resonance extended beyond the immediate aftermath of her whisper. Days, weeks, and even months later, the memory of that moment lingered like a shadow that never fully dissipates. It influenced my interactions, my decisions, and the way I viewed the world. Ordinary challenges felt amplified, ordinary joys felt tinged with an awareness of fragility, and ordinary moments with my daughter were forever colored by the knowledge of the depth of our shared vulnerability. This weight was not something that could be set aside. It became a companion, a constant reminder of the complexity of human emotion and the profound impact that honesty, even when delivered in its simplest form, can have on the soul. There is also a paradox in this kind of pain. It is at once deeply isolating and yet profoundly connecting. While the burden pressed heavily upon me, it also reminded me of the depth of my bond with my daughter, the courage it took for her to speak, and the trust inherent in our relationship. Emotional weight, in this sense, is not purely destructive. It is transformative. It forces introspection, it fosters empathy, and it demands an engagement with life that is far more intense and deliberate than before. Yet this transformative power does not diminish the difficulty of carrying the weight. It merely adds a layer of meaning to the struggle, a recognition that some pain, though almost unbearable, is inseparable from the richness of human connection and the complexity of love. As I reflected on the experience, I began to understand the subtle ways in which the emotional burden reshaped my perspective. It was no longer possible to view the world with naive simplicity. Every interaction, every glance, every gesture became a potential repository of truth, of unspoken weight, of hidden significance. The whisper of my daughter had opened my eyes to the profound impact that honesty can wield, and the responsibility that comes with hearing it. I became more attuned to the nuances of emotion, more sensitive to the silent struggles of those around me, and more aware of the impermanence and unpredictability of life. The emotional weight, though oppressive, had carved a new depth into my consciousness, a heightened awareness that demanded attention, respect, and careful navigation. Yet, even with this growing understanding, the immediate sensation of carrying such weight remained overwhelming. There were nights when sleep eluded me, when the memory of her words echoed in the quiet darkness, amplifying the heaviness in my chest. There were moments of distraction in which the ordinary flow of life seemed incongruous with the intensity of the emotional reality I now inhabited. And still, despite the ongoing struggle, there was a recognition of the necessity of this experience. Some truths, no matter how painful, are essential to growth, to connection, and to the authentic engagement with life and those we love. The emotional weight is both a trial and a gift, a crucible through which the heart is tested, tempered, and, in its own way, expanded. In the end, the emotional weight of that whispered truth became a defining presence in my life. It was a reminder of the power of honesty, the fragility of human emotion, and the transformative potential of love expressed with courage. The burden was immense, yet it carried with it the undeniable reality of connection, the profound depth of trust, and the intricate layers of intimacy that exist between a parent and child. Every heartbeat, every breath, every thought carried traces of that moment, and while the weight was heavy, it was also a testament to the depth of feeling, the intensity of human experience, and the undeniable force of truth spoken in love. The bond between a parent and child is unlike any other connection in the world. It is a silent understanding, an unspoken trust, a lifetime of shared moments that weave together to create a tapestry of love, protection, and profound intimacy. Yet, sometimes that very bond becomes the lens through which truths hit hardest, the medium through which words echo with a force that is both beautiful and devastating. When my daughter whispered that truth, the weight of the moment was magnified not just by what was said, but by the sacred context in which it was shared. The bond we had nurtured for years, a fragile yet resilient thread of love and trust, transformed a simple confession into an experience that reshaped everything I thought I knew about connection, vulnerability, and the emotional depth of a child's perception. From the very first days of her life, the bond had been instinctual and profound. There were nights spent cradling her as she slept, hours devoted to soothing fears that had no words, and countless moments where communication was expressed not through language but through touch, gaze, and the rhythm of shared breathing. Over time, these moments formed a foundation, a bedrock of trust and mutual understanding that, while often silent, was palpable. It was this very foundation that allowed her to whisper a truth with such courage, knowing that her words would be received, honored, and preserved within the safe sanctuary of our relationship. Yet, the same foundation that protected her also amplified the impact of her revelation. The bond magnified the significance of her words, making their emotional reverberation all the more intense, all the more unavoidable. There is a paradox in such moments of intimacy. The closer you are to someone, the more power they have to affect you, to reach into the depths of your being, and to expose vulnerabilities you might otherwise shield from the world. My daughter's voice, soft and tentative, carried within it the innocence of childhood and the profound honesty that only a child can offer. Her words were not filtered, not softened by the political or emotional considerations that adults often employ. They were raw, immediate, and piercing in their clarity. And because they came from someone whose life I had nurtured, whose experiences I had guided, and whose heart I had tried to protect, the emotional weight was exponentially greater. The bond between parent and child had transformed a simple truth into a seismic event, a revelation that demanded more than comprehension. It demanded emotional surrender. The impact of the parent-child bond in such moments is not only emotional, but also ethical and moral. There is a profound responsibility inherent in hearing a child's truth, a duty to honor, protect, and respond with care. The vulnerability that comes from this relationship is sacred, a trust that is not granted lightly and that carries immense moral weight. In my daughter's whisper, I sensed both the courage required to speak and the unspoken reliance on me to hold, interpret, and navigate the truth with sensitivity and compassion. This awareness deepened the emotional intensity, creating a complex interplay between love, responsibility, and the unavoidable pain of confronting a reality that neither of us had anticipated. The bond itself became a lens, magnifying every nuance, every hesitation, and every inflection in her voice, reminding me that our connection was both a shield and a conduit for profound emotional resonance. What made the experience particularly piercing was the innocence entwined with the revelation. Children perceive the world with a clarity that is unburdened by cynicism, and their insights, while sometimes simple in form, can carry truths adults often overlook or deny. My daughter's words were imbued with this purity, a clarity that stripped away the filters I had constructed over years of experience. In the parent-child bond, the innocence of the child acts as both mirror and magnifier, reflecting the depths of love while amplifying the potential for pain. Her trust in me to listen without judgment, to absorb her truth without recoil, underscored the sacredness of our relationship while simultaneously intensifying the emotional impact. It was a reminder that in such bonds, vulnerability is both gift and responsibility, and the smallest whisper can resonate with the force of a tidal wave. The physical manifestations of this bond were impossible to ignore. I felt a visceral connection, a pull toward her that was immediate and undeniable, an instinctive need to protect and comfort even as I grappled with the enormity of what she had revealed. Each movement, each gesture between us became laden with significance. The touch of her hand, the tilt of her head, the fleeting glance that carried volumes of unspoken meaning, all of it was heightened by the knowledge that her trust had been placed in me in that singular, delicate moment. The parent-child bond made the truth almost tangible, as though the emotional weight could be transferred between our bodies, shared in the silent language of love, concern, and empathy. It was a connection that defied rational explanation, existing beyond words, a conduit for both the pain and the profound beauty of human intimacy. Emotionally, the experience highlighted the complexity of such a bond. It is not simply a source of comfort or joy. It is a terrain in which vulnerability and strength coexist, where love and responsibility are inseparable, and where a single word can shift the landscape of understanding in ways that are both transformative and destabilizing. The bond allows a child to feel safe enough to speak a truth that might otherwise remain hidden, but it also leaves the parent acutely aware of the fragility of that safety. Each heartbeat, each breath is a negotiation of emotion, a dance between empathy, protection, and the struggle to remain steady in the face of profound revelation. In that delicate balance, the parent-child bond demonstrates its full emotional potency, revealing both its capacity to comfort and its ability to amplify pain. The long-term implications of such a moment are equally profound. Bonds of this nature shape the way we process, remember, and internalize experiences. The whisper of my daughter did not exist in isolation. It became part of the intricate tapestry of our relationship, altering the dynamics, deepening the trust, and simultaneously expanding the emotional complexity of our connection. Every interaction thereafter carried traces of that moment, a subtle reminder of the courage it took to speak and the depth of feeling required to listen. The parent-child bond, in its profound intimacy, ensures that some truths are not fleeting. They are embedded, shaping perceptions, responses, and emotional landscapes for years to come. It is both a blessing and a burden, a living testament to the power of connection and the transformative nature of honesty. In that moment, I also understood the extraordinary resilience inherent in the parent-child bond. Despite the intensity of pain, the depth of emotional impact, and the sudden rupture in the fabric of perceived normalcy, the connection remained intact. It was not weakened by the truth. If anything, it was strengthened, reshaped into something more profound, more aware, and more attuned. The bond provided a framework in which pain could coexist with love, fear could coexist with trust, and vulnerability could coexist with strength. It was a reminder that the deepest connections in life are rarely simple, rarely linear. They are complex, layered, and capable of carrying both unimaginable joy and equally profound sorrow. Ultimately, the parent-child bond transformed the whisper of truth into an experience that was both deeply personal and universally human. It illustrated the ways in which love, trust, and intimacy can magnify both the beauty and the pain of life, showing that some of the most powerful lessons, the most transformative experiences, and the most enduring emotional imprints come not from grand gestures, but from quiet, courageous acts within the sacred space of connection. My daughter's words were a moment suspended in time, a testament to the enduring power of a bond forged through years of care, devotion, and shared existence, a bond capable of carrying truths that are at once unbearable and essential. There are moments in life that arrive with such sudden force that they leave everything you once believed suspended, fractured, and irreversibly altered. The whisper of my daughter carried within it one of those moments, a seemingly small confession, yet one that struck at the very foundation of my existence. In an instant, the world as I had known it was reshaped, not with the loud crash of a storm, but with the quiet, precise intensity of a needle threading through the delicate fabric of reality. Time seemed to stretch, each second both fleeting and eternal, as I tried to absorb what she had said, realizing with a jolt that nothing would ever be the same again. The life I had been living, the routines, the comforts, the illusions of security, had all been disrupted by a truth that demanded recognition, understanding, and reckoning. The immediacy of the impact was overwhelming. In that single whispered confession, the ordinary patterns of daily life lost their familiar rhythm. The laughter of previous days, the quiet contentment of routine, even the simple acts of walking through familiar spaces, all of it felt different, tinged with an awareness that the world I had inhabited was now partially a construction of assumptions, some of which had been shattered by the force of her words. Each movement, each glance, each moment of silence carried a weight of reflection. I found myself reevaluating interactions, searching for meaning in memories that had seemed clear before, questioning every glance, every smile, every gesture. The revelation was not just emotional, it was existential, forcing a reconsideration of what I thought I knew, what I believed, and how I had understood the lives of those I loved most. there is a profound disorientation that accompanies life-altering moments. The mind struggles to process the enormity of what has happened, attempting to hold onto the familiar while grappling with the new reality that has been thrust upon it. I experienced a dizzying internal tension, a tug-of-war between denial and acceptance. Part of me wanted to rewind, to erase the moment, to pretend it had never occurred. Yet another part recognized that reality could not be undone, and that to live fully, I had to face the consequences of the revelation and navigate the altered landscape it created. In that tension, the gravity of the situation became tangible. Life-altering truths do not simply coexist with the old reality. They demand attention, integration, and transformation, forcing a confrontation with aspects of ourselves and others that we might never have examined otherwise. The emotional complexity of such a moment cannot be overstated. There is grief, certainly, a mourning for the innocence of previous assumptions and the comfort of what we believed to be true. There is shock, a sudden awareness of the fragility of relationships and the unexpected twists of human behavior. And yet, intertwined with these difficult emotions is also a deep, visceral awareness of the importance of truth, honesty, and transparency. The life-altering nature of my daughter's whisper lay not only in its content but in its inevitability, the recognition that truth, once spoken, changes the trajectory of thought, feeling, and action. There is no returning to a prior state, no reclaiming the unknowing, and no undoing the impact of knowledge once it has been entrusted to the heart. Physically, the moment was impossible to ignore. The body responds to life, altering experiences in subtle and undeniable ways. My chest tightened, my heartbeat raced, and there was a vertiginous sense of imbalance, as though the very ground beneath me had shifted. Even ordinary acts like breathing became exercises in endurance, echoing the internal weight of the emotional upheaval. The physical manifestation of this truth mirrored the internal shock, reinforcing the reality that some revelations are not merely intellectual or emotional. They are existential, affecting the body as acutely as the mind. Each breath became a reminder of the burden of understanding, each heartbeat a testament to the sudden, profound responsibility of navigating a world forever altered. There is also a temporal dissonance inherent in moments that change life. Time itself behaves differently when one confronts a revelation of this magnitude. Seconds seem to stretch interminably as the mind cycles through analysis, reflection, and emotional processing. Memories of the past are reframed, perceived through the lens of the new understanding, and expectations for the future are immediately recalibrated. I found myself questioning not just the specific circumstances of the revelation, but the broader trajectory of life itself. The knowledge imparted in a single whispered confession rippled outward, altering perceptions of relationships, priorities, and the nature of trust and vulnerability. Life-altering truths do not confine themselves to a single moment. They extend forward, creating new frameworks through which every future choice and interaction is viewed. The relational impact was profound. The bond between my daughter and me was never the same after that moment, though it was not weakened. Rather, it was deepened, transformed, and made more nuanced by the shared experience of confronting a truth that demanded careful attention. Each interaction afterward carried the subtle imprint of her words, a reminder that communication is never neutral, and that honesty, even when painful, is both a gift and a responsibility. The life-altering nature of the revelation was not limited to the immediate emotional aftermath. It persisted, shaping patterns of interaction, expectations, and the subtle emotional dynamics that define familial connection. The truth, once spoken, became a lodestar around which all future engagement was organized, a constant reference point for understanding, empathy, and caution. Psychologically, the moment forced a reevaluation of my own perceptions and assumptions. The human mind seeks coherence and narrative, and when confronted with a truth that disrupts familiar patterns, it experiences a profound cognitive dissonance. I found myself revisiting past events, reinterpreting conversations, and questioning judgments I had previously accepted as accurate. Every memory was now layered with new meaning, every perception reevaluated through the prism of the revelation. The life-altering nature of the experience was not simply emotional, it was cognitive, challenging deeply held beliefs about myself, my daughter, and the dynamics of our lives. It underscored the truth that the most impactful moments in life are rarely neutral. They demand both emotional and intellectual engagement, reshaping the way we understand reality itself. Despite the difficulty of navigating such a revelation, there was also a recognition of the essential human capacity for resilience and adaptation. Faltering moments, while disruptive and often painful, force growth. They demand reflection, empathy, and the courage to confront difficult truths. The whisper of my daughter, though deeply unsettling, became a catalyst for transformation, an opportunity to confront my own vulnerabilities and to engage with the world with greater awareness, sensitivity, and intentionality. Life-altering moments are not merely events. They are turning points, thresholds through which one passes into a heightened state of consciousness, a more profound understanding of the fragility, complexity, and beauty of human existence. The reverberations of the moment were felt in the quietest and most ordinary spaces. A walk through the familiar corridors of home, a glance at a photograph, the sound of her laughter, each instance carried echoes of the revelation, a subtle yet persistent reminder that life is never static and that truth, once spoken, reshapes the very framework of perception. The ordinary became extraordinary, the mundane laden with significance, and each interaction was imbued with a consciousness of the fragility of trust and the depth of connection that allows for the sharing of profound truths. Life-altering moments, once experienced, leave permanent marks not as scars alone, but as points of transformation, inflecting every choice, every thought, and every emotion that follows. Ultimately, the altering moment created by my daughter's whisper was both a rupture and a renewal. It fractured the comfortable illusions of life, yet it also demanded a deeper engagement with reality, a heightened appreciation for honesty, vulnerability, and the intricate dynamics of human relationships. It was a reminder that life is fragile, that truth carries transformative power, and that even a single word, whispered in love and trust, can redefine the trajectory of an entire existence. Such moments, though intensely painful, are essential to growth, shaping the contours of emotional and relational landscapes in ways that endure, resonate, and ultimately expand the capacity to understand, empathize, and love more fully. Some suffering is invisible, carried quietly within the confines of the heart, expressed not in loud cries or outward displays, but in the stillness between breaths, in the pauses of speech, and in the shadows behind eyes that once sparkled with carefree joy. The truth, my daughter whispered, created such suffering, a profound ache that could not be measured by tears alone, or seen in the expressions I wore to the world. It was a private anguish, an internal struggle that demanded navigation and endurance without the consolation of external acknowledgement. Each beat of my heart seemed to carry the weight of what had been revealed, a silent rhythm that echoed in the depths of my chest, a constant reminder of the emotional fracture that had quietly taken root in the very core of my being. The most insidious aspect of this kind of pain is that it isolates. Outwardly, life continues in its normal flow. Conversations, routines, obligations, smiles, all appear unaffected to anyone observing from the outside. Yet within, the heart is a battlefield. The whisper of my daughter had opened a space in which grief, disbelief, confusion, and fear collided. It was as though the world had shifted slightly on its axis, and while everyone else moved forward, I was suspended in a moment of silent reckoning, trying to make sense of a reality that had abruptly changed. The weight of this internal suffering was like a constant hum, a vibration that I could neither escape nor fully articulate, demanding recognition even as it insisted on secrecy. In this quiet torment, even breathing became a labor. The heaviness of truth pressed against the chest in ways that were almost tangible, making each inhale deliberate and each exhale hesitant. The body, unable to separate itself from the emotional burden, mirrored the internal struggle in subtle but persistent ways: tension in the shoulders, a knot in the stomach, a lingering tightness in the throat. Each movement became conscious, each sound measured, each interaction filtered through the lens of pain that could not be shared. This silent suffering was not merely emotional. It was visceral, embedding itself into the very rhythm of life and making the most ordinary experiences feel weighted with unspoken grief. The challenge of silent suffering is compounded by the absence of a clear outlet. Words often fail to capture the depth of what is experienced. Even tears, when they come, are insufficient to convey the full magnitude of the internal storm. I found myself searching for ways to process the ache, to translate it into something tangible, yet every attempt seemed inadequate. The whisper of my daughter had created an emotional gravity that pulled inward, a private universe in which I alone was aware of the full spectrum of feeling. Others could see fragments, fleeting expressions of sorrow or hesitation, but the core of the suffering remained hidden, inaccessible, and profoundly personal. This invisibility, while isolating, also amplified the intimacy of the experience, a reminder that some forms of pain are meant to be endured privately, shaping resilience and depth of understanding in ways that visible suffering cannot. At times, the weight of unspoken anguish manifested in moments of disconnection from the world around me. I would catch myself staring into space, my mind looping through her words, replaying them, dissecting every syllable, and exploring the layers of meaning embedded in the gentle confession. Ordinary interactions, smiles, greetings, conversations, felt distant, as if filtered through a screen of quiet despair. It was not apathy, but a form of hyper-awareness. The emotional intensity of the truth demanded so much energy to process that even simple engagement with daily life became a challenge. Silent suffering consumes attention, reshaping focus, altering priorities, and forcing a reallocation of emotional resources that others cannot see or measure. Yet, in this quiet suffering, there is also a profound awareness of the stakes of human connection. The bond with my daughter, the trust she placed in me, and the courage required to speak her truth amplified the depth of the pain. I understood that her whisper was not just a revelation, but a gift, a testament to the strength of our relationship and the vulnerability that accompanies love. The suffering, though intense and isolating, was intertwined with gratitude, tenderness, and an acute awareness of responsibility. Silent suffering is never merely destructive. It reshapes empathy, heightens sensitivity, and deepens the capacity to hold the emotional realities of oneself and others with care and presence. The mind, in silent suffering, becomes both sanctuary and prison. On one hand, reflection allows for processing, understanding, and attempts at meaning-making. On the other hand, the unrelenting weight of internalized pain can trap thought in repetitive loops, where each recollection of the whispered truth triggers renewed waves of grief, fear, or helplessness. I became acutely aware of how memory and perception interact with emotion, how a single sentence can reverberate endlessly within the mind, and how silence can amplify the power of what was said. The suffering was silent because it was relentless. It demanded attention yet offered no reprieve, creating a complex interplay between endurance and emotional vigilance. Physical spaces also bore witness to the weight of this suffering. Rooms, hallways, even the familiar comfort of our home seemed charged with echoes of the moment. A chair where we had sat together, a light falling across the floor, the quiet sound of her breathing, all these ordinary elements became vessels for the invisible burden I carried. Silent suffering transforms the familiar, coloring perception with subtle shades of intensity that outsiders rarely notice. The ordinary environment becomes a stage for internal drama, a repository of memory, and a mirror reflecting the profound emotional impact of words that are as gentle as they are devastating. What made the experience particularly poignant was the interplay between presence and absence. I was constantly aware of my daughter, the trust she had placed in me, and the bond that had allowed her to speak so honestly. Yet at the same time, I felt a profound solitude in carrying the emotional weight. Others could not share it, could not fully understand it, and could not lighten the load. The suffering was my own to hold, a private testament to the depth of connection and the intensity of emotional resonance. This duality, the closeness of relationship coupled with the isolation of personal grief, is a hallmark of silent suffering, creating a tension that is both painful and transformative. Through this experience, I came to understand that silent suffering has its own form of power. It demands introspection, fosters emotional resilience, and cultivates empathy that is difficult to achieve through any other means. The whisper of my daughter forced me to confront realities I might have avoided, to engage deeply with emotions I might have suppressed, and to recognize the capacity of the human heart to endure, reflect, and carry weight without collapse. Silent suffering does not diminish the vibrancy of life. Rather, it reshapes the lens through which life is experienced, creating a heightened sensitivity to the fragility, beauty, and complexity of human emotion. Even in moments of outward calm, the echo of her words persisted. Every laugh, every smile, every ordinary interaction carried a subtle trace of the internal struggle. Silent suffering, by its nature, exists alongside life rather than in opposition to it, creating layers of experience where joy, sorrow, and reflection coexist. It is a constant companion, a quiet reminder that some forms of love and connection carry burdens that are as profound as they are invisible. The whisper of my daughter became both a catalyst and a measure of this weight, a truth that demanded endurance, introspection, and an unwavering capacity to hold emotional complexity with grace and presence. Through the journey of silent suffering, I realized that endurance is not passive. It requires attention, intentionality, and courage. Each moment of reflection, each attempt to process, each effort to engage with the world while carrying the unseen burden represents an act of resilience. The pain remains, yet it transforms the way the heart perceives, understands, and responds. Silent suffering is a quiet, invisible alchemy, converting raw emotional weight into depth, awareness, and a capacity for empathy that transcends ordinary experience. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of love that is both tender and transformative. Pain, when it strikes with such intensity, does not always allow immediate understanding. At first, there is shock, disbelief, and the raw emotional weight that demands attention, yet over time, there emerges a quiet, deliberate process, a journey toward understanding that is as much about discovering oneself as it is about comprehending the truth that caused the suffering. When my daughter whispered that truth, the initial moments were consumed by the immediacy of the emotional upheaval, the sheer heaviness that pressed down upon my chest, making every breath feel like a labor. But as the initial shock began to settle, a different awareness emerged, one that nudged me toward reflection, interpretation, and the slow, painstaking path of comprehension that comes from confronting life, altering revelations with courage and presence. Understanding is rarely immediate because human emotion and cognition often require time to reconcile. The truth my daughter shared was not just information. It was a mirror reflecting layers of perception, expectation, and reality that I had not fully acknowledged before. To truly grasp its meaning, I had to retrace the steps of our relationship, revisit the moments of connection, and consider the context in which her words had been spoken. This process was neither linear nor easy. Each reflection revealed new dimensions, aspects of the past that now appeared in a different light, and subtle truths that had previously gone unnoticed. The journey toward understanding demanded patience, introspection, and a willingness to face uncomfortable emotions without deflecting or denying them. The first stage of this journey involved emotional processing. It required acknowledging the hurt, the betrayal, the grief, or the confusion that had arisen from the whispered truth. I could not rush through the feelings, nor could I suppress them. Doing so would have prevented true comprehension. Instead, I allowed myself to feel fully, to inhabit the depth of the emotional landscape, and to recognize the physical manifestations of pain in my body, the tightness in my chest, the tension in my muscles, the subtle tremors in my hands. Emotional processing is the foundation of understanding, because it prepares the mind and the heart to engage with the truth without distortion, avoidance, or defensiveness. In this space, I began to confront the reality of the revelation, not as a fleeting moment, but as a force capable of reshaping the contours of my perception and the trajectory of my life. Reflection followed, a deliberate turning over of thoughts and memories in light of the new reality. I recalled past interactions, searching for subtle cues, moments that previously seemed insignificant, and gestures that now carried new meaning. Each memory was examined through a lens colored by understanding, revealing hidden layers of truth, intention, and context. This reflective process is essential in any journey toward comprehension because it transforms passive reception of information into active engagement. It is not enough to simply hear a truth. One must wrestle with it, situate it within the broader tapestry of life, and explore its implications for both self and others. Reflection allows the mind to move from reaction toward insight, from shock toward clarity. Empathy, too, became a crucial part of the journey. Understanding is not solely about intellectual recognition. It is also about seeing the world through the eyes of others, particularly those who have spoken the truth. In my daughter's whisper, there was courage, innocence, and trust. To comprehend the full weight of what had been shared, I had to inhabit her perspective, feel her vulnerability, and acknowledge the bravery it took to reveal something so intimate. Empathy bridges the gap between the speaker and the listener, transforming comprehension from a purely analytical act into an experience imbued with compassion, relational awareness, and emotional attunement. Through empathy, the journey toward understanding deepened, creating a connection that was not diminished by the pain, but enriched by the shared vulnerability. Acceptance emerged gradually, a gentle surrender to the reality that life, relationships, and emotions are complex and often beyond simple resolution. Acceptance does not imply resignation or passivity. Rather, it is an acknowledgement of what is, a willingness to engage with the truth as it exists, and an understanding that some questions may remain unresolved. In the wake of my daughter's revelation, acceptance was not instantaneous. It arrived in stages, through cycles of reflection, emotional processing, and empathetic engagement. Each step of this journey strengthened the ability to hold the truth with integrity, to integrate it into life without allowing it to dominate or define every moment, and to carry forward with a renewed sense of presence and intentionality. Alongside acceptance, meaning-making became central to the journey. Human beings seek coherence and purpose, and even the most painful truths are interpreted in light of broader narratives of life, love, and growth. I began to see the revelation not solely as a source of anguish, but as an opportunity for deeper connection, for heightened awareness, and for personal transformation. Meaning-making is an active process. It requires thought, creativity, and the willingness to embrace complexity. In this case, the whispered truth illuminated aspects of my relationship with my daughter that might otherwise have remained unexplored. The strength of her trust, the courage of vulnerability, and the delicate balance between honesty and protection that defines intimate relationships. By seeking meaning, the pain was not erased, but it became a teacher, a guide on the journey toward understanding and emotional maturity. The process of understanding also involved integration, learning to reconcile the past, present, and future in light of the new reality. Integration means allowing the truth to inform life without overwhelming it, to reshape perception without causing paralysis, and to guide decisions and interactions with wisdom rather than fear. I began to notice subtle shifts in my awareness, a more attuned listening, a heightened sensitivity to both spoken and unspoken communication, and a deeper appreciation for the fragility and resilience of human emotion. Integration is a lifelong process. The journey toward understanding does not conclude with acceptance or reflection alone, but continues as one navigates the ongoing dynamics of relationships, trust, and love. Resilience was cultivated along the way. Understanding a profound truth requires strength, not brute force, but the quiet endurance of the heart and mind. Each stage, emotional processing, reflection, empathy, acceptance, meaning, making, and integration, contributed to a deeper capacity to hold complexity without collapse, to navigate emotional intensity without being consumed, and to remain present in the face of ongoing uncertainty. The journey toward understanding is transformative precisely because it tests and stretches the limits of emotional and cognitive capacity, leaving the individual with a refined sense of perception, insight, and relational depth. Finally, the journey illuminated the interconnectedness of all these elements: emotion, thought, empathy, acceptance, meaning, integration, and resilience. Each step reinforced the others, creating a holistic process through which the whispered truth could be held, understood, and honored without losing sight of the broader context of love, connection, and shared humanity. The journey toward understanding is not linear or simple. It is a dynamic, evolving process that requires engagement on multiple levels and a commitment to emotional authenticity. It transforms both the individual and the relationship, creating depth, intimacy, and wisdom born from the courage to confront what is often painful, complex, and unavoidable. Through this journey, I came to recognize that understanding is both a destination and a path, a continuous process that deepens with time, reflection, and care. The whispered truth of my daughter became a catalyst for this journey, revealing the intricate layers of love, trust, vulnerability, and courage that define our connection. It taught me that suffering, when approached with patience and openness, can become a profound teacher, that emotional weight can be transformed into clarity, and that even the most difficult revelations carry the potential for growth, insight, and enduring understanding.